بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Alhamdulillah, welcome back to another lesson of Mastering Tarkeeb. Inshallah, today we will be covering أدوات الشرط الجازمة and وغير الجازمة, the instruments of the conditional instruments which are jussive and non-jussive. What that simply means is sometimes we see a sentence that is a conditional sentence and it governs two fi'l mudhari', two imperfect tense verbs. So simple example, in tansur, ansur. If you help, I will help. So sometimes we see that we have conditional sentences, but however, it doesn't govern the verb after it. We can't see any apparent effect on the verb after it. So for example, when we say Lammā, so same example, if we say Lammā tansuru, well, in that case, you will actually use past tense verb. Lammā nasarta, nasartu. When you helped, I helped. So sometimes we see that the conditional particles, some do govern and put the verbs after it in the state of jazm, and some do not. So inshallah, let's get started. So Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. First, we'll be covering أدوات الشرط الجازمة. This is our conditional particles that do govern and put the fi'l mudhari' in the state of jazm. So jussive conditional particles, i.e. particles that put the fi'l mudhari' in the state of jazm. So we have the first one, which is in. So what we're going to do is, inshallah, we're going to go through a series of conditional particles which actually govern and put the fi'l mudhari' in the state of jazm. So the first one we have here is in. So here we have the example in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن تنصروا الله ينصركم. So here we can see that the conditional particle in has appeared here. It's putting the fi'l mudhari' in the state of jazm. How do we know that? Because the nun i'rabi has dropped off, because it would have been tansuruna. However, fi'l mudhari' in the state of jazm, the nun will drop off. That's why it's in tansuru. And it's not only impacting one verb, it's impacting the next verb as well, which is the outcome of the condition. So let's get the translation down first. If you help Allah, in tansurullaha, so that's the condition. What's the outcome? What's the jaza? Yansurkum. He will help you. So notice here, the fi'l mudhari' is also in the state of jazm. So we're not saying yansurukum, it's yansurkum. Why? Because this conditional particle in has governed two fi'l mudhari's, two imperfect tense verbs. The first one being tansuru, and how do we know that? Because the nun i'rabi has dropped off. And in the second one, because obviously it's in the singular form, wahid mudhakkar ghaib, or it's al-ghaib. So we can see that here it has been affected by the governing word in by having a sukoon at the end. Yansurkum. So let's break it down in terms of tarkeeb. So in would be harfu shart, the particle of condition. And when we have particle of conditions, we have a condition and we have the outcome. So the condition will be known as shart, that's the sentence itself. So here the condition was, if you help Allah. So you help Allah, let's break that down, the shart, the condition. So tansuru is fi'lun mudhari'un majzumun. It's an imperfect tense verb in the state of jazm because of in, and the fa'il is the waw. And the sign of it being in the state of jazm is the nun i'rabi dropping off. Because in the rough state, it'll be tansuruna. What does that make ismul jalala? Maf'ul bihi. So the ismul jalala is maf'ul bihi. And this now, the fi'l mudhari' with the fa'il and maf'ul bihi, tansurullah, will now become the shart, the condition. Like we said, the conditional particles, they actually have two sentences after them, and one is the condition and the other one is the outcome. So the conditional sentence is known as shart. What's the outcome if you help Allah? Yansurkum. He will help you. So let's break this down. Yansur is fi'lun mudari'un, also majzumun, because in is impacting the two verbs, tansuru and yansur. The fa'il is hidden inside, which is huwa, and that refers back to ismul jalala, Allah. And the kum is maf'ul bihi. He will help you. Now, what does this yansurkum, this sentence become on its own? It becomes the jawab shart. So some places they would just say jaza, and some places they would just do tarkeeb and say the jawab of the shart. So you could say shart and you could say jaza, or you could say shart and jawab shart. Now, shart and the jawab shart together, the condition and the outcome, will become a complete sentence. So it's jumla fi'liya because it started with a verb. Tansuru, we won't take into consideration the particle in because it's a particle, so that don't determine what sentence it is. Shartiya because it's a conditional particle. So this is something new we're adding on now when we're doing conditional sentences. So we will say jumlatun fi'liyatun shartiyatun. It's a jumla that started with the verb and it's conditional. So like we said, we're going to cover a series of conditional particles. Next, we have the conditional particle also governs the fi'l mudari, so al-jazima. So remember, some adawatu shart, some conditional instruments are not jazima, that they are going to be covered later on. So what we're covering first is the ones that are jazima, the ones that put the fi'l mudari in the state of jazm. So next one we have is mahma. So we have here mahma tunfiq fil khayr yanfa'ka, which means whatever you spend. Mahma means whatever. Tunfiq means you spend. Fil khayr, in the way of good. Yanfa'ka, it will benefit you. So let's break this down in terms of tarkeeb. Mahma would be ismu shart. Notice in the previous one we said harfu shart. It's important to note that we're saying adawatu shart. So in grammar books, if there are some conditional particles that are nouns and some are huruf, some are asma and some are huruf, to incorporate both, they just say adawatu shart. Because you can't say asma'u shart or hurufu shart, because yes, you can, but then it'll restrict it to just nouns and particles. However, the conditional words, they can be nouns or particles. So that's why something that's inclusive would be adawat. Instruments, conditional instruments. So adawat you can translate as conditional, adawatu shart as conditional instruments, and that incorporates nouns and particles. So that's one thing to understand as well, that not every conditional particle is a harf. It could be a noun. Now the key, this is the game changer. When it's a particle harf, you can carry on. You could have shart and you can have jaza or jawabu shart, like we done in the previous slide. In tansurullaha yansurkum. So tansurullaha was the shart. You help Allah. What would happen if you help Allah? Yansurkum, He will help you. That's the outcome. In is just isolated as harfu shart. However, when it's a noun, the noun possibly can play a role as becoming maf'ul bihi, and even some cases it can end up becoming a mubtada as well. Okay, so it'll actually be incorporated with the shart. So it'll play a role with the shart. So it won't be isolated as ismu shart and that's it. It'll either become the maf'ul bihi of the verb which is coming afterwards, or it could end up potentially even becoming mubtada, and whatever comes afterwards can become khabar, which we'll come across. So just to reiterate that, when we have a conditional noun, ismu shart, it becomes part of the sentence that comes after it. Okay? So tunfiq is fi'lun mudari'un. It's in the state of jazm because of mahma. which means whatever. So whatever you spend in the way of good. So Mahmā is becoming the maf'ul bihi of muqaddam of tunfiq, because that's what you're spending. In other words, whatever you spend. So Mahmā is becoming the object, maf'ul bihi, but however, it's been advanced because conditional words take precedence and they come before. So it will be incorrect to say tunfiq fil khayr mahma, bringing the maf'ul bihi after, because it's a condition, it has to come before. That's why we were saying it's ismu shart. It still plays a role, part of the shart, jumla shartiyya, and here it's becoming maf'ul bihi muqaddam. Tunfiq is from anfaqa yunfiq, which means to spend. We got the fa'il mudari, it's majzoom. Notice here there's a sukun here. Remember, the letter is known as sakin, the symbol is sukun. So sometimes people do get mixed up and they say, call the symbol sakin. Sakin is the letter that has the symbol sukun. Sukun is the symbol, sakin is the letter has the sukun symbol. The fa'il in tunfiq is anta, so whatever you spend. Fi means in, so jar. Al khayr is majroor. And this prepositional phrase, we can connect it to the verb tunfiq. Now notice here, we're going to incorporate mahma into the shart. So we're going to say the maf'ul bihi muqaddam plus the fa'il mudari with the fa'il and its muta'alliq mahma tunfiq fil khayr. This will group together and become the shart. What's the outcome of this? Yanfa'ka. So notice here we're not saying yanfa'uka, because these are instruments of condition which are jazima, so they are going to govern two fa'il mudaris. The first one being tunfiq, the second one being yanfa'. So that's why it's majzoom. So yanfa'ka, we actually have three words here. We have the fa'il mudari, which is majzoom because of mahma. We have the fa'il inside, which is huwa. So it will benefit you. So that huwa, it is referring back to whatever you spend, mahma. And the kaf is you. So again, fa'il mudari majzoom, the fa'il is huwa, which refers back to the noun mahma, and the kaf is maf'ul bihi. Now what does this sentence become? Yanfa'aka, it becomes jawabu shart. It becomes the response to the shart. So like we said, remember, we said that a conditional particle, a conditional instruments, we can call it adawat. It's just that we're used to saying conditional particles, but there can actually be nouns as well. Okay? So the shart and the jawabu shart together will become a complete sentence, jumla fi'liya, even though the noun's at the beginning, but that noun is actually becoming the maf'ul bihi of tunfiq. So in terms of its status, it actually should come after the verb. But it's taken precedence because it's a conditional noun. So in terms of structuring the sentence, it actually still will be fi'liya, even though the noun has come at the beginning. But its role is being maf'ul bihi, and that generally comes after the verb. So it will be classified as jumlatun fi'liyatun. Shartiyatun, because it's what? Conditional. So this is the second instrument, conditional instrument, which is jussive al-jazima. It puts the fa'il mudari, two fa'il mudaris in the state of jazm. Here tunfiq and yanfa'. Our third one is idhmā. Now idhmā, let's look at an example. Idhmā tajtahid tanal ja'izatan, which translates as whenever you work hard. So idhmā gives a translation of whenever you work hard, tanal ja'izatan, you will earn a reward. So you will get a gold star or etc. So idhmā is harfu shart. Okay, so it's a conditional particle. Tajtahid is fa'il mudari majzoom. So notice here idhmā is actually impacting the verb tajtahid. Okay, idhmā, if I'm not wrong, I think will be considered to be actually ismu shart, if I'm not wrong. So we can correct that one. So idhmā, yeah, so idhmā will be ismu shart. Okay, so let's just annotate that. Let's get a box in there, inshallah. So Idhmā, we're going to put there. اسم الشرط. Okay. Idhmā اسم الشرط. تجتهد is فعل مضارع مجزوم. The file is أنت. So whenever you work hard, this becomes the condition. So تجتهد is the condition. What's the outcome? تنال جائزة. So تنال is فعل مضارع مجزوم. Notice here that this was actually تنال. It's from نال ينال, which means to obtain. So تنال, the alif dropped off. Okay? And the lam, the last letter has got a sukoon. So it became tanal. So tanalu became tanal because it's in the state of jazm, because of the conditional instrument idhmā. So tanal fi'lun mudhari'un majzumun. The file is anta, so you will obtain or you will earn. Ja'izatan is the maf'ul bihi. You will earn a reward. Now tanal ja'izatan, the fi'l mudhari with the file anta and the maf'ul bihi ja'izatan will become the response to the condition. So jawab al-shart. That's the outcome. So notice here, because there was harf al-illa, alif in tanalu, it drops off. So whenever we see that fi'l mudhari has harf al-illa in the state of jazm, the harf al-illa will drop off as well. So for example, you got qala yaqulu, you put lam before yaqulu, it'll become lam yaqul. So not only the last letter gets a sukoon, the harf al-illa will also drop off. In terms of the bigger picture, it becomes jumla fi'liya shartiyya. Okay, so it will become a sentence fi'liya because starting with the verb. Here idhmā, you can even potentially, because it's got the meaning of zarf, whenever, you can make it muta'alliq to tajtahid. So remember when you said if it's a noun, it will actually play a role with the shart. So sticking to that rule, if idhmā is ismu shart, it's got the meaning of zarf, being adverb of time. So whenever, we can make it متعلق. So اسم الشرط متعلق بالفعل تجتهد. And that's how it become part of the shart. Next one, let's get rid of the annotation, inshallah. Okay, next one we have is حيثمā. Now حيثمā, we've got an example here. حيثمā يدخل طيب الأخلاق يجد له أصدقاء. Which means wherever. حيثمā means wherever. يدخل طيب الأخلاق, good character enters. يجد له أصدقاء, it finds for itself friends. So wherever good character enters, it finds for itself friends. So notice here, حيثمā is conditional. So يدخل, the فعل مضارع is مجزوم, and the other فعل مضارع is here يجد. So notice here, it's مجزوم as well. We're not saying يجد and we're not saying يدخل. So let's break this down into the Tarkeeb. حيثمā, حيث is اسم الشرط. It's a conditional noun. The ma will be considered to be here زائدة, because the actual اسم الشرط, the actual word which is ظرف, is حيث. The ma is what? Extra. That will be in the case in idhmā as well. Here we can even make it متعلق to يدخل, because like we mentioned before earlier on, when a noun comes as conditional, it plays a role with the shart. So يدخل is فعل مضارع مجزوم, imperfect tense verb. It's in the state of jazm because حيثمā governs two فعل مضارعs. طيب, so wherever good character enters, so طيب is مضاف, الأخلاق is مضاف إليه. طيب means good, الأخلاق means traits, so good traits and good character is إضافة الصفة إلى موصوف. So you're doing إضافة actually the صفة, which is طيب, which means good, and الأخلاق means morals, which is the موصوف, منعوت. So in other words, الأخلاق الطيبة. Well, however, this is valid in Arabic grammar. You can bring the sifa and make the mawsuf as mudaf ilayh. When you have words like that fall in the pattern of sifatun mushabbahatun, tayyibul akhlaq. So mudaf ilayh becomes the fa'il of yadkhul. Now, حيثما يدخل طيب الأخلاق. Wherever good character enters, this is the condition. So here as well, we can make حيث متعلق is ظرف مكان. And we mentioned in our first few lessons that ظروف, they also become connected to verbs. Just as the way prepositional phrases become connected to verbs, ظروف also are connected to verbs. In essence, even jar majrur is actually a ظرف as well. يجد, now we're making the jawab of the shart, so it's فعل مضارع مجزوم. So imperfect tense verb in the state of jazm, because حيثما is governing two فعل مضارع, the first being يدخل, the second one being يجد. The fa'il is inside, which is huwa, and it refers back to good character. So the good character will find lahu, this jar majrur muta'alliq is muta'alliq to yajid. Will find for itself, what would it find for itself? Asdiqa'a is the maf'ul bihi, friends. Notice here, there's no tanween because the word asdiqa'a is ghayr munsarif, and the cause is that it's got alif mamduda at the end, like words hamra'u. And you don't need to look for a second cause, because when a word is feminine with alif mamduda, then it's equal to two causes. You don't need to look for the second cause. So asdiqa'a is ghayr munsarif, and the cause is it's got alif mamduda, and that's equated to two causes. Now, what does yajid lahu asdiqa'a become? That becomes the response to the condition, jawabu shart. Okay, the jawab of the condition, which was yadkhul tayyibul akhlaq. And then the sentence as a whole becomes jumla fi'liya. Why we're saying fi'liya when haythu was at the beginning? It's a noun. Well, remember, it's actually zarf makan, and dhuruf can't take the role of mubtada'un. This is something we mentioned earlier on in the Tarkeeb lesson. Simple sentences, Ayna anta, where are you? So Ayna is a noun, but because it's zarf makan, or either if it's zaman, it won't take the role of mubtada'un. So you will always say it's khabar muqaddam if it's a jumla ismiya sentence, or if it's a jumla fi'liya sentence, then you'll make it muta'alliq to the verb. So in Ayna anta, there's no fi'l after it. Anta is a noun. So Ayna will be khabar muqaddam, anta will be mubtada muakhar. So in this case, because there's a verb, we can connect it to the verb and it becomes part of the shart. So that's why we're saying it's jumlatun fi'liyatun. Because it's involved in a conditional sentence, we will say shartiyatun. Next, we have the word Kayfamā. So let's look at an example. كيفما تفعل مع أبويك يفعل معك أبناؤك. Nice saying. So however, كيفما gives the translation of however, تفعل you treat, مع أبويك your parents. However you act with your parents. يفعل معك أبناؤك. So will your children treat you. Okay, so will your children act with you. So in other words, however you act with your parents, that's how your children will act, because why? They are sponges, they absorb morals, traits, ethics, and they learn from the parents. So if the parents are doing that to, their parents, then the child's going to grow up and do the same to their parents, answering back, being disrespectful, etc. But if somebody treats their parents with honor, dignity, and respect, then there's a high likely chance that the children will grow up and give that respect to their parents as well. So Kayfamā, let's break this down. Kayfa is ismu shart. Okay, so and the ma is za'ida. Taf'al is fi'lun mudari'un majzumun. The fa'il is what? Anta. Even kayfa as well, we can't make kayfa take the role of mubtada'un here, because kayfa actually gives them enough fi ayyi halatin, in whichever circumstance, in whichever manner. So يعني في أي حال, or في أي كيفية, in whichever manner, تفعل مع أبويك. So if كيف is interpreted as في أي كيفية or في أي حالة, that's a prepositional phrase. It can't take the role of مبتدا when we interpret it as في أي كيفية or في أي حالة. That's why here it will play a role and it become part of the shart, but it won't take the role of مبتدا even though it's a noun at the beginning of a sentence. The ما is زائدة. تفعل is فعل مضارع مجزوم. Notice here it's in the state of جزم, so we can see the تفعل, the سكون. When I say تفعل, the file is أنت. So however you conduct yourself. مع is مضاف. أبويك, so there's two إضافas here. So how would we say the middle word? It's مضاف إليه and also مضاف towards the kaf, which is مضاف إليه. This possessive, double possessive phrase مع أبويك will group together and become مفعول في ظرف مكان. So it becomes adverb of place. So however you conduct yourself with your parents or with. And this sentence, تفعل مع أبويك, this will become now the condition, the shart. So up to here we've done the condition. What's the outcome? يفعل معك أبناؤك. Your sons will deal with you in the same way. So يفعل is فعل مضارع مجزوم. So notice here the فعل مضارع, he has also got a jazm. The fa'il is huwa, which refers back to, sorry, the fa'il is not huwa, the fa'il is abna'uka. So that's actually a mistake there. So we want to get rid of that. The fa'il is actually coming afterwards. So we've actually inserted the fa'il there. So that's a mistake. So yaf'al is fi'lun mudari'un majzumun. Now let's carry on. Ma'a is mudaf. Ka is mudaf ilay. The mudaf ilay, again, same as previous one, becomes maf'ul fi ظرف makan. Abna'u is mudaf, the kaf is mudaf ilay, so your sons will deal with you in the same way. So mudaf ilay will become the fa'il of yaf'al. So the fa'il is not huwa, it's actually abna'uka, which has come after. Now what does the sentence yaf'al ma'aka abna'uka become? It becomes the response to the condition taf'al ma'a abawayka. So it becomes jawab shart. And grouping the whole sentence together, it becomes jumla fi'liya, because starting with the verb, we won't take into consideration kayfamā, even though it's a noun, because interpreted as fi ayyi kayfiyatin, and shartiyya because it's what? Conditional. Moving on to our next sentence. So there was a bit of an annotation here, so I'm not sure where it was. Probably round about there. Hopefully we've clicked it off. Okay, next one is man. So here we have مَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا, which means whomsoever fears Allah, يَجْعَلْ لَهُ, he will make for him مَخْرَجًا, a way out. So whoever fears Allah, whoever is conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in times of difficulty, Allah will make a way out for him from his hardships. Now notice here, we've got man. So man here is going to become ismu shartin mubtada'un, whomsoever, because this man is not an adverb of time or place. It's not ظرف makan or zaman like the previous ones. Ayyāna, sorry, Ḥaythumā, Kayfamā, Idhmā, etc. So man here itself will take the role of mubtada'un. That means everything else, the shart and the jaza together, will form to become the khabar of man. So let me repeat that again. Man itself is mubtada'un. Why we're making man the mubtada here? Because it's got no meaning of being an adverb of time or place. Whomsoever. It's not saying wherever or whenever, etc. Yattaqi is fi'lun mudari majzumun. The fa'il is hidden inside the subject, which is huwa, and that refers back to man. Now, yattaqi was actually with a ya. Ittaqa yattaqi ittiqa'an, which means to be, conscious or to fear. There's a few translations. Now, we can see yattaqi, because it's in the state of jazm, the ya has been dropped off, so it's become man yattaqi. So this is the sign of this word being in the state of jazm, that the ya has been omitted. That makes ismul jalala maf'ul bihi, whomsoever fears Allah. Now yattaqillaha, this sentence becomes the condition. What's the outcome of whoever fears Allah? يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. So notice here is يَجْعَل. The فعل مضارع here is majzoom because man is governing actually two فعل مضارعs. One being يتقي, it was يتقي, but it became يتقي because of man. The ya has been dropped off. This one is also governed, but here the sukoon demonstrate it being in the state of jazm. Lahu, prepositional phrase, we can connect it to yaj'al. He will make for him. The fa'il, by the way, of yaj'al is huwa, and that refers back to ismul jalala. What would he make for him? Makhrajan. So makhrajan is the maf'ul bihi. Maf'ul bihi. Now yaj'al lahu makhraja, this will now become the outcome of the condition yattaqillaha. Yaj'al lahu makhraja will become the outcome of yattaqillaha. Now the shart and the jawab shart will become a sentence. This jumla yattaqillaha yaj'al lahu makhraja will become in the state of raf. Why? Because it becomes the khabar of the mubtada, which was man. So let's say this again. The shart yattaqillaha and the jawab shart yaj'al lahu makhraja will group together and become in the state of raf. Why? Because it's forming to become the mubtada, the khabar of the mubtada man. Now the mubtada, which was man, and the khabar, which consists of shart and jawab shart, will become jumlatun ismiyatun. Notice here, all the previous ones we were saying fi'liyatun. Here we are saying ismiyatun, because there's a noun at the beginning of a sentence that can take the role of becoming mubtada'un. And shartiyatun because it's conditional. Moving on to our next one is ma. So ma operates like man, but ma is used for ghair aqil, irrational entities. Man is used for rational entities. So here, let's look at an example. ما تفعلوا من خير يعلمه الله, which simply translates as whatever you do, ما تفعلوا من خير of good, يعلمه الله, Allah knows it. So let's break this down. The ma here is مفعول به مقدم, meaning you do of good whatever. But because it's a condition, it has to come before. So here we can say ma ismu shartin maf'ul bihi muqaddam. We're not making it mubtada'un. Because in the previous one, man yattaqillaha, it's not becoming the maf'ul bihi of yattaqi. The maf'ul bihi was Allah. But however here, the ma is becoming the maf'ul bihi of taf'alu, whatever good you do. So that's why we won't make this as mubtada'un. Taf'alu, normally it'll be taf'aluna, but because this is in the state of jazm, the noon i'rabi has dropped off, so we're going to say taf'alu. So taf'alu is fi'lun mudari'un majzumun. The fa'il is the waw. Now whatever you do, min is jar, khairin majroor. Now this prepositional phrase, we're not going to connect it. Let's get rid of the annotation. We're not going to connect this fi'l mudari'. We're not going to connect this prepositional phrase min khairin to the fi'l mudari' taf'alu. Why? It's actually becoming hal of the maf'ul bihi. So in other words, we are saying whatever you do, it being from good, whilst it is from good, ya'lamhu Allah, Allah knows it. So here, min khairin, the prepositional phrase is becoming connected to that which is hidden, which is ka'inan. So ma taf'alu ka'inan min khairin, whatever you do, it being from good, becomes the hal of the ma. So ma is dhul hal, min khairin becomes muta'alliq to ka'inan, which is hal. Dhul hal and hal, then you can say it's become maf'ul bihi muqaddam. You can do it like that as well. So however, now this whole part here, ma taf'alu min khairin, the maf'ul bihi muqaddam, taf'alu the fi'l mudari with the fa'il, which is the waw. and the hal of ma, which is min khayrin, becomes shart, the condition. What's the outcome? What's the jawabu shart? Ya'lamhu Allah. So notice here, it's ya'lam. So this being in the state of jazm is signified by the nun i'rabi being omitted, and here the fa'il mudari has been signified being in the state of jazm by having the sukoon, ya'lam. So it's not saying ya'lamu. So ya'lam is fi'l mudari majzumun. The ha would be maf'ul bihi muqaddam. Allah knows it. So ismul jalala will be fa'il muakhar, the delayed fa'il. Now what does ya'lamhu Allah become? It becomes the jawab, the response to the shart, taf'alu min khayrin. And in terms of the bigger picture, it becomes jumla fi'liya, because we're going to say that the sentence, the main component was taf'alu, ma was maf'ul bihi, which comes after in terms of its status in the sentence. However, just because it's conditional, that's why it had been advanced. So it will actually be jumlatun fi'liyatun, and because it consists of shart and jawabu shart, we'll say it's conditional shartiyatun. Next, we have the word kullama. So here we have a sentence, kullama irtafa'a qadrul kareem izdada tawadu'an, which translates as the more the status of the noble one. So, or every time, kullama, you can say the more, or every time the status of the noble one, irtafa'a, increases, izdada tawadu'an, he grows in humility, tawadu'an. So true noble people, one of their characteristics is, as the more they grow in terms of status amongst the people, it increases them in humility. It does not make them arrogant and behave, in a manner with pride and arrogance and haughtiness. So kullama, let's break this down. Kullama, the word kulla is dharf zaman, because in other words, we are going to say every time or every moment. So kulla ظرف زمان, it'll be متعلق to the verb ارتفع, متضمن معنى الشرط. It entails the meaning of shart. So when you say every, kulla means every moment or every time. The mudhaf ilayh has not been mentioned yet. We're going to make the mudhaf ilayh. So at this moment, just understand kulla, it means every, but it's referring to every moment or time. So kulla is actually na'ib al-dharf. It's fitting in for the actual dharf which is hidden. Okay, so it's na'ib dharf. It's connected to the verb irtafa'a because dhuruf, we said that they act like jar majrur, so we will connect them to what? Verbs. So here it's connected to irtafa'a. It entails, mutadamminun, entails the meaning of shart. Okay, so not every time kulla entails the meaning of shart, but here it does. Now with the ma, there's two possibilities. Either the ma is mastariyya. That means irtafa'a qadrul kareem is going to become mastar mu'awwal, and that's going to become mudhaf ilay of kulla. Or the second possibility, the ma is nakiratun mawsufatun bima'na waqt. Ma entails the meaning of being a nakira word, okay, which has been described, a nakiratun mawsufatun, okay. So it's a described nakira, and it's the meaning of waqt. So what we're going to say is kulla waqtin. So the word waqt will be mawsuf, and irtafa qadrul kareem will be the sifa, and that together will become the mudhaf ilayh of kulla. So let's break this down further. Irtafa is past tense verb, which means to increase or become elevated. So what becomes elevated? The status of the noble one. So qadru is mudhaf, al-kareem is mudhaf ilayh. Now the mudhaf ilayh will become the fa'il of irtafa. So whenever the status of the noble one increases, irtafa'a. Okay, now this sentence, irtafa'a qadrul kareem. If we take ma to be mastariyya, then we will have to interpret irtafa'a qadrul kareem as mastar mu'awwal. So irtafa'a, the mastar is irtifa', and make the fa'il as mudhaf ilayh. So irtifa'i qadril kareem. So kulla irtifa'i qadril kareem. Now that will become the ظرف. So ارتفاع قدر الكريم, okay, if you make it تعويل of مصدر, that will become the مضاف إليه. ارتفاع قدر الكريم, it will become the مضاف إليه of كله. Or we said that the word ما is actually نكرة in the meaning of وقت and it's موصوفة. So we are going to say that this sentence ارتفع قدر الكريم is في محل جر because it's becoming the نعت of ما, which is in the meaning of وقت. So in other words, we are saying كل وقت كل وقت فيه ارتفاع قدر الكريم. That probably will be better. كل وقت فيه ارتفاع قدر الكريم. So let's just, because this the way we phrased it here, that don't actually make into a sifa. So كل وقت فيه ارتفاع قدر الكريم. So if you make it the sifa, it'll actually give the meaning of the sentence can be interpreted as every moment in which the status of the noble one increases is ازداد تواضعا, he increases in humility. So it'll be كل وقت. So in this situation, the word waqt will have a tanween. So let's just get a tanween there for the word waqt. And then I can explain it, inshallah. Oh, sorry, it's white. So let's get the black one. So let's explain this. So kulla means every, and is deputizing for the zarf, which is waqt. The ma here, either we make this ma masdariya. If this ma is masdariya, then irtafa'a qadrul kareem. The verb with the fa'il will become masdar mu'awwal, sorry, and that will give the meaning of kulla irtifa'i qadril kareem. Every moment of the increase of the status of the noble one is that tawadu'an, he increases in humility. So irtafa'a qadrul kareem will become masdar mu'awwal irtifa'i qadril kareem, and it become the mudaf ilay of kulla. The second possibility was this ma is actually nakiratun mawsufatun. It's actually considered to be in the meaning of an indefinite noun, nakiratun. And what's that indefinite noun? Waqt. And also the word waqt is mawsuf. That means the sentence after is becoming sifa. Why? كل وقت فيه ارتفاع قدر الكريم. If you have a nakira word and a jumla after it, it's man'ut an-nat. We've done this earlier on in the man'ut an-nat lessons. So كل will be مضاف, نائب ظرف, وقت is موصوف, فيه ارتفاع قدر الكريم, فيه is خبر مقدم, ارتفاع قدر الكريم will become مبتدا مؤخر, and then this sentence فيه ارتفاع قدر الكريم will become the nat of وقت, and then منعوت النات وقت فيه ارتفاع قدر الكريم will become the مضاف إليه of كله. So that's two possibilities of the ma. One of the case, كلما ارتفع قدر الكريم will become the shart. ازداد is فعل الماضي. The fa'il is huwa, which refers back to the word al-karim, the noble one. He grows and increases. تواضعا is tamyiz. He increases in what aspect? تواضعا. So tawadu'an has come to remove doubt. So tawadu'an would be the tamyiz of the fa'il in izdada. And then the fa'il with the fa'il and its tamyiz becomes the jawab al-shart, which is kullama irtafa'a qadrul karim. And in terms of the bigger picture, it becomes jumla fi'liya, because we'll say starting with the verb irtafa'a. Qadra is actually just zarf. It becomes connected to the verb irtafa'a, and shartiyatun because it is conditional. Okay, there's a lot of annotation we need to get rid of. So before we continue. Let's get rid of all these annotations. Hopefully that's got rid of most of them. Next, we have the conditional particle Matā. Okay, so Matā tajtahid tanjah, which simply means when you strive, you will succeed. When you strive, you will succeed. So notice here, two fail mudari is going to adjust. One is tajtahid, and the other one is tanjah. So Matā here will say is ismu shart because it's an adverb of time, when. We can't make it mubtada'un, so we'll connect it to the verb tajtahid. So ismu shartin muta'alliqun bi tajtahid. Now what's that tajtahid? Is fi'lun mudari'un majzumun. The fa'il is anta. You, when you strive, that becomes the shart. What happens when you strive? Tanjah, you will succeed. So this is the outcome, jawabu shart. So we got fi'lun mudari'un majzumun. So it's from najaha yanjahu. And the file is anta, and that becomes the jawabu shart. Now shart and jawabu shart will become jumlatun fi'liyatun shartiyatun. We're not going to say ismiyatun because the ism here, the noun here is actually zarf. So I can't take the role of mubtada. Next we have Ayyāna. So for example we have Ayyāna takun wafiyan yakthur muhibbuka, which means whenever you are faithful, your friends increase. So whenever Ayyāna takun, you are wafiyan, faithful, yakthur means increase, muhibbuka means your friends. So let's break this down. Ayyāna is ismu shart. It's also zarf zaman because it refers to time. So we can't make this as mubtadaun. And here is connected to the khabar of takun, wafiyan. Takun is fi'lun mudari'un naqisun. So it's in perfect tense verb, but it's incomplete naqis. That means it's going to have an ism and it's going to have a khabar. And notice here the khabar is mansub, wafiyan. Where's the ism? It's hidden inside, takun. Whenever you are wafiyan, faithful, so wafiyan is the khabar of takun. What does takun wafiyan become? That becomes the shart, the condition. Now that leaves us with the outcome, yakthur muhibbuka. Your friends increase. So yakthur, notice here is majzoom as well, because Ayyāna is governing two fail mudharis. One is takun, and in takun, the waw harful illa has dropped off as well, because it was takunu. So the waw harful illa has dropped off, and also it's got a sukoon. In yakthur, is just sukoon. Muhibbuk, so mudhaf mean your lovers. Muhibbuk is muhibbu is actually muhibbuna, but because it's a sound masculine plural, at the time of idhafa, the noon drops off. So you can say muhibbuka. Otherwise, the word is muhibbuna, lovers. But your lovers, so the noon will drop off. So muhibbu is mudhaf, kaf is mudhaf ilayh. Mudhaf ilayh becomes the fa'il of yakthur. Now yakthur muhibbuka, your friends increase. This becomes the outcome of the shart, takun wafiyan. And in terms of the bigger picture, it becomes jumla fi'liya because starting with the verb takun, we won't take into consideration Ayyāna because it's zarf. Shartiyatun because it's what? Conditional. So that's Ayyāna done. Notice here we are covering instruments of condition which are jazima. Next we have Annā. Annā, for example, here we have Annā yakun al-Nilu jariyan yukhsibil ardu. Annā yakun al-Nilu jariyan yukhsibil ardu, which means wherever the river Nile flows, the land becomes fertile. Okay, so Annā here again is ismu shart, wherever, so is zarf makan. So we want to get correct, actually we put zaman, isn't it? So we're going to put zarf makan. Oops. So Annā is zarf makan. Zarf makan. Let's just do that in red. Okay, so it's poppy there. And it's muta'alliq to the khabar of yakun. So it's supposed to be yakun. And the khabar here is jariyan. Okay. So yakun is fi'lun mudari'un majzumun. So we can see here it was yakun nu, but the waw has dropped off because of anna, and also it's got a sukun. So yakun. But because we're joining onto the word an-nil, we have to give you a kasra. So anna yakunin nilu. Wherever the river Nile jariyan flows. So Nil is the ism of yakun, and jariyan is the khabar of yakun. Now yakun with this ism and its khabar and its dharf will become the shart, the condition. So we can merge anna actually with the condition here. What's the outcome? Yukhsibil ardu. The land becomes fertile. So yukhsib was actually yukhsibu. But because of anna it became in the state of jazm, so it became yukhsib. But because we're joining on to the next word, we have to give you a kasra. We're going to say yukhsibil ardu. So it's fi'lun mudari'un majzumun. That makes al-ard to become the fa'il. And yukhsibil ardu, this will become the outcome of the condition yakunin nilu jariyan. And in terms of the bigger picture, it becomes jumlatun fi'liyatun because fi'l mudari'un naqisun is still a verb. Okay, and anna being a noun, because it's zarf, we can't take the role mubtadaun. So we're going to say it's jumlatun fi'liyatun involved in a conditional sentence, so shartiyatun. Okay, so let's get rid of the annotation there. Next we have is ayya kitabin taqra yusa'idka, which means whichever book you read, yusa'idka, it will help you. So here ayya is mudaf, whichever book, because ayya works with idafa. We're giving you a fatha because it's going to become the maf'ul bihi of taqra. In other words, taqra ayya kitabin, you read whichever book. But because it's a condition, it has to come at the beginning. So kitab is mudaf ilay. The mudaf ilay will group together, become ismu shart, the maf'ul bihi muqaddam of taqra. So whichever book you read. So notice here we're not making it mubtada'un even though it's a noun, because it can fit the role of becoming the maf'ul bihi of the verb. So taqra is fi'lun mudari'un, the fa'il is anta, and then this whole sentence here, ayya kitabin taqra, will become the condition, the shart. What's the outcome? It will benefit you. So notice here, we're not saying yusa'iduka, it's yusa'idka with the sukoon. Because ayya is governing, is conditional here, is governing to fi'l mudaris. So yusa'id is fi'l mudari majzumun. The fa'il is huwa, which refers back to the book, whichever book, it will help you. The kaf is maf'ul bihi. And that becomes the response to the condition. And the shart and jawabu shart together will become a sentence. Jumla fi'liya, because starting with the verb taqra, we won't take into consideration ayya kitab because it's becoming the maf'ul bihi of taqra. And in terms of status, rutba, maf'ul bihi normally comes after. The only reason why it's come earlier is because it's involved in a conditional sentence. And shartiyatun because it consists of shart and jawabu shart. Next we have is law. So here we have law shi'ta lattakhazta alayhi ajra. Obviously this is a conversation between Musa and Khidr alayhi salam. So he said, if you want, you could have taken a wage from them for straightening the wall. So if you wish, you could have taken a fee for it. So law here is harfu shart. Remember, now we're moving on from ismu shart. Law is not actually a noun, it's harfu shart. Okay? It's ghayru jazim. Why? If you look at it, there's no fail mudari after this now. Now we're going to come across conditional particles which do not put the, there's no fail mudari after it for it to put in the state of jazm. So we will say it's ghayrul jazima. So notice here we are covering instruments of condition which are not jussive. They don't put the verb after it in the state of jazm on the parent. One may argue and say it's fail mazi can be fi mahalli jazm. That's a possibility, but in terms of its apparent, there's no fail mudari after it, so that's why we can see that it's not having a jazm. There's no nothing evident to suggest that it's what in majzoom on the apparent. So that's why it's what غير jazim. Shi'ta is fi'l madin. So if you wanted, if you wished. Okay, the file is the ta. That becomes the condition. If you wished, what's the outcome? You could have taken a fee for it. The lam here is in response to law. So that's one thing to remember here. When you use a conditional particle law, before the response, a lam appears. Sometimes the lam is what? Not even mentioned. Okay. So sometimes it is apparent. Sometimes when you see fa'il madhi manfi with a ma, then it's left out. Like in the Quran, وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَوْ كُنَّا نَسْمَعُ وَنَعْقِلُ مَا كُنَّا فِي أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ. So there, it don't say لَمَا كُنَّا فِي أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ. So if you have a past tense verb which is manfi, the lam is not brought, it's omitted. Okay? So lam here is response to the law. اتخذت is past tense verb. The file is the ta. Alayhi is a prepositional phrase. We can connect that to اتخذت, and ajran is the maf'ul bihi. And what was اتخذت alayhi ajran? Becomes the jawab of the shart, which was shi'ta. And together becomes jumlatun fi'liyatun here, because starting with the verb shi'ta, we're going to take into consideration the particle law. And shartiyatun because it's involved in a conditional sentence. Next we have is lawlā. So lawlā, for example, here we have lawlā ajalun musamman laja'ahumul adhab, which translates as, had it not been for an appointed term, the punishment would have come upon them. So here, ajalun musamma is a condition. We're going to learn that something is actually omitted from here, and the outcome is ja'ahumul adhab, and the lam has come on the response to the conditional particle lawlā. So lawlā is harfu shart. It's not one that puts the verb after in the state of jazm. Ajalun is man'ut, musamman is na'at. Man'ut and na'at becomes actually mubtada of the khabar, which is mahzuf, which is mawjudun. A lot of times we'll see, when lawlā is used, the mubtada is mentioned, but the khabar is always hidden. Lawlā antum lakunna mu'minin. Okay? Had you not been around, had you not existed, we would have been believers. In other words, lawlā antum mawjuduna lakunna mu'minin. So lawlā ajalun musamma, had he not been for an appointed time, been existent or existing. So ajalun musamma, man'ut and nat becomes mubtada. Some may argue and say, well, mubtada is ma'rifah. However, one way to make mubtada, even though it's nakiratun indefinite, become a specific definite word, i.e. nakiratun mukhassasatun, is by bringing the sifa. So if you have a mubtada which is nakiratun and the sifa is mentioned, it can now take the role of becoming mubtada because it's become specific by mentioning the sifa, and in this case it's musamman. So the man'ut and nat become mubtada and the khabar is mahzuf, which is mawjudun. So in other words, the sentence reads lawlā ajalum musamman mawjudun. So that becomes the shart. The lam is in response to lawlā, and what's the outcome? Ja'ahumul adhab. So ja'a is past tense verb. The hum is maf'ul bihi. Would have come to them what? The punishment. So al-adhab is the fa'il mu'akhar, the delayed fa'il. And ja'ahumul adhab will become the response to the shart, which was lawlā ajalum musamman mawjudun. Shart and jawabus shart will become jumlatun ismiyatun shartiyatun. So it becomes a sentence ismiya here because it started off here with a mubtada khabar sentence, and shartiyatun because it's involved in a conditional sentence. Next we have is lawlā Annā. So in the Quran we see lawlā annahu kana min al-musabbihin lalabitha fi batnihi ila yawmi yub'athun. In relation to Yunus alayhi salam, had he not been of those who min al-musabbihin, who proclaim Allah's purity, what's the outcome? lalabitha fi batnihi ila yawmi yub'athun. lalabitha fi batnihi ila yawmi yub'athun. He would definitely had remained or lived in its belly, meaning of the whale, till the day he will be, or they will be, raised. Ila yomi yub'athun. So notice here, lawlā here is the conditional particle. It's non-jussive, so it's not actually governing and put in anything after in the state of jazm, because there's past tense verbs after, so there's no fi'l mudari for you to accept the state of jazm. So let's break this down. Lawlā is harfu shart, it's غير جازم, non-jussive. Annā is harfun mushabbahun bifi'lin, and we know Annā has a ism and he has a khabar. So here the ism of Annā is the pronoun who. The kana now min al-musabbihin is going to become the khabar of Annā. So let's break this down, because the khabar of Annā is actually a sentence. So kana is fi'lun madin naqisun. The noun of kana is huwa, which refers back to obviously Yunus alayhi salam. Had he not been, min al-musabbihin, min is jar, al-musabbihin is majroor. This prepositional phrase will become connected to that which is hidden, which is thabitan, and that'll become the khabar of kana. Yani kana thabitan min al-musabbihin, or kana mawjudan min al-musabbihin. Had he not been from those who proclaim the purity of Allah, and the outcome is coming. But let's get to the shart first. Kana min al-musabbihin, this now is going to become the khabar of kana. Annā now with his ism and his khabar will be interpreted as a singular word, and the khabar will be hidden. So Lawlā annahu kana min al-musabbihin will be interpreted as Lawlā tasbihuhu mawjudun. Had his proclaiming of Allah's purity not been present, he would have remained in the belly of the whale till the day when they will be raised. So you have to interpret this as a noun. So Lawlā tasbihuhu annahu kana min al-musabbihin will be interpreted as tasbihuhu, and we said Lawlā, just as we in law the khabar is omitted, so we say mawjudun is omitted, that becomes a khabar. And this sentence, Lawlā annahu kana min al-musabbihin, when it's interpreted as Lawlā tasbihuhu mawjudun, this will become the shart. The lam here is in response to the conditional particle Lawlā, and now let's make the jawab. Labitha is past tense verb. The fa'il is huwa, which obviously refers back to Yunus alayhi salam. Fi is a preposition, so jar. Batnihi mudaf ilayh becomes the majroor, and that becomes connected to the verb labitha. Ila is jar. He would have remained in its stomach till a day when they will be raised. So ila is jar. Yom is mudaf, and the verb yub'athun, which is a sentence, that actually becomes fi'l mudari, the naib fa'il, which is the waw, that becomes a mudaf ilayh. So yub'athun, this is a sentence fi mahalli jar. So sentences can actually experience a state of jar if they are becoming the mudaf ilayh of something before. So here yub'athun is becoming the mudaf ilayh of the word yawm. So day of them being raised. So the mudaf ilayh becomes majroor because of ila, and the prepositional phrase ila yawm yub'athun will become connected to the verb labitha. And then labitha fi batnihi ila yawm yub'athun, the fi'l mazi with the fa'il with its two muta'alliqs will become the response to the condition annahu kana min al-musabbihin. And then in terms of the bigger picture, it becomes a sentence ismiya, because we will say it's considered to be jumla ismiya because of Lawlā tasbihuhu mawjudun, and shartiyatun because it's involved in a conditional sentence. Next we have is Lawlā an. So we have here Lawlā an tadarakahu ni'matun min rabbih lanubidha bil ara'i. So same again in relation to Yunus alayhi salam. Had he not been from a favor from his Lord, tadarakahu, to come to him, lanubidha, he would have been cast bil ara'i, in the wilderness. So let's break this down. Lawlā is harfu shart. It's not governing, it's not putting any verb in the state of jazm. And here is masdariyun, so that means whatever's going to come after, we have to interpret it as a one masdar. Even Annā in the previous one, فَلَوْلَا أَنَّهُ كَانَ مِنَ الْمُسَبِّحِينَ, An is not just masdariyya, a particle that is interpreted as a masdar. Annā can also be interpreted as a masdar as well. And Annā, ma, and even hamzatul taswiyah. So there's actually 4 words that can be interpreted as a masdar mu'awwal. Here we're just doing the word an. تدارك, so تدارك is فعل مضارع. Sorry, تدارك is فعل ماض. So this is wrong. Okay, so let's annotate this. تدارك is actually from تدارك يتدارك. It's actually فعل ماض. Okay, so تدارك is فعل ماض. The who is مفعول به. Now نعمة, had it not been for the favor that came to him, so نعمة, before we make it fa'il of تدارك, it's actually man'ut. Because if you have a nakira word and you have a prepositional phrase, it's considered to be man'ut and nat, a favor from his Lord, which was from his Lord. So ni'matun is man'ut min rabbihi, so there's a bit of mistake on the word min. Min is jar, Rabb is mudaf, he is mudaf ilay, so from his Lord, that becomes majroor, prepositional phrase becomes connected to that which is hidden, which is ka'inatun. So had it not been for a ni'mah, a blessing which came to him from his Lord. So ni'matun ka'inatun min rabbihi, the man'ut and nat becomes the file of tadarakahu. And then an, masdariya with the fa'il, which will be interpreted as tadaruku, and the fa'il will become mudaf ilay, ni'mati rabbihi, and the maf'ul bihi will be brought separate as iyyahu will become mubtada'un, and the khabar will be hidden, which will be mawjudun. So lawlā tadaruku ni'mati rabbihi iyyahu mawjudun. Had it not been for the favor of his Lord coming to him, being present, lanubidha bil arai, he would have been casted in the wilderness. So here, the masdar mu'awwal will be mubtada'un, and the khabar of that masdar mu'awwal is hidden, which is mawjudun, and that becomes the shart. La is in response to lawlā, and what's the jawab of this? Nubidha is fi'lun madin. Okay, it's actually naib fa'il, not fa'il, it's actually naib fa'il. So let's just get the word naib there. So the naib fa'il of nubidha is huwa, which refers back to obviously Yunus alayhi salam. B is jar, al-ara is majroor, and then the prepositional phrase will be connected to the verb nubidha. And nubidha bil arai, that'll become the response to the shart, which was lawlā an tadarakahu ni'matun min rabbihi. In terms of the bigger picture, it becomes a sentence, jumla ismiya, because it's starting with a noun, because we interpreted an tadarakahu ni'matun min rabbihi as tadaruku ni'mati rabbihi iyyahu mawjudun, and shartiya because it consists of a conditional sentence. Let's get rid of the annotation, inshallah. Okay. Next we have is Lawmā. So Lawmā al-ilmu lahalakatil bashariyatu. Had there been no knowledge, humanity would have been destroyed. So Lawmā, harfu shart, it's ghayr jazima, so it's not actually becoming effective. Al-ilm will be mubtada'un, so Lawmā al-ilmu mawjudun, and that becomes a shart. The lam is in response to Lawmā, and what's the outcome? Halakatil bashariyatu. Halakat is past tense verb. Al-bashariyatu, the humanity would have been destroyed, is the fa'il, and that becomes the jawabu shart of Lawmā al-ilmu mawjudun. And to the bigger picture, it becomes a sentence, jumlatun ismiyatun shartiyatun. Next we have is Lammā, also not considered to be jazima. So Lammā amanu kashafna anhum adhab al-khizyi. When they believed, kashafna anhum adhab al-khizyi, we removed from them punishment of humiliation. So Lammā here is zarf zaman. It entails the meaning of shart. So when we say when, and here it'll be muta'alliq to the jawab. So when they believed, what's the outcome? Kashafna anhum. So here Lammā will be considered to be متعلق to the جواب كشفنا عنهم. آمنوا is فعل ماض, the file is واو, so when they believed. This sentence آمنوا on its own will be in the state of jar, because why? It's considered to be the مضاف إليه of لما. So in other words, حين آمنوا, وقت آمنوا, or حين آمنوا, حين إيمانهم, at the time of them believing. So آمنوا will be a sentence, it'll be experienced in the state of jar because it's considered to be the مضاف إليه of لما. And then the مضاف إليه لما آمنوا, whether you want to interpret it as حين إيمانهم, will become connected to the verb كشفنا. So كشفنا is فعل ماض, the file is the na, عنهم is a prepositional phrase. We can connect that to كشفنا, and what do we remove from them? Punishment of humiliation. So عذاب is مضاف, الخزي is مضاف إليه, and that will become the مفعول به of كشفنا. And كشفنا عنهم عذاب الخزي, it becomes the jawab of لما, but we will say it's not experiencing any i'rab, because the jawab of لما, we're going to do in the coming slides, some sentences they experience i'rab and some don't. This is one of the sentences that don't experience i'rab when it becomes the jawab of لما. Until the bigger picture, it becomes جملة فعلية because it started with the verb, and شرطية because it's what? Conditional. Next we have is إذا. So here we have an example. إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم. Whenever Allah is mentioned, their hearts tremble. وجلت. So إذا here again, ظرف زمان, it's adverb of time. It has the meaning of shart, and it'll be متعلق to the jawab, which is وجلت. So this sentence here, ذكر الله, will become the مضاف إليه of إذا, because إذا is actually ظرف. So ذكر is فعل ماضي. The Ismul Jalala is naib file of ذكر الله when Allah is mentioned, and this sentence will become في محل جر because it's مضاف إليه of the ظرف إذا. And وجلت is فعل ماضي. قلوبهم مضاف إليه becomes the file of وجلت because that's what trembles, and that becomes a jawab of إذا. So the jawab of إذا as well is one of those sentences that don't experience a state. To the bigger picture, it becomes جملة فعلية. You can probably consider it شرطية as the previous one because إذا entails the meaning of shart, or you could just say جملة فعلية. Next we have أما. Now the word أما, it depends what comes after it. Sometimes it could be جملة اسمية, sometimes it could be جملة فعلية. But here, after أما, we're going to see that there's a mubtada, so the sentence will be actually, the sentence that comes after it will be considered to be jumla ismiya, but as the whole picture, we'll see how it entails to become. So here we have in the Quran, أَمَّا عَادٌ فَاسْتَكْبَرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ. As for Ad, so أَمَّا normally is translated as or however. As for Ad, فَاسْتَكْبَرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, they were arrogant in the land. So how are we going to do tarkeeb of this sentence? Well, أَمَّا is harfu shart, it's a conditional particle. It won't be having an impact on the sentence after it. Adun is mubtada'un. That means it's going to have a khabar which is going to come after. But in between the mubtada and khabar, there's a fa which comes on the jawab of amma. Now we're going to realize amma actually signifies an omitted sentence. And he gives the meaning of whatever the case, Ad, they were arrogant in the land. So let's just make the khabar of the mubtada first here. Istakbaru is fi'lun madin. The file is the waw. So they were arrogant. Fi is jar. Al-ard is majroor. This prepositional phrase will become connected to istakbaru. Now, istakbaru fil ard will become a sentence fi mahalli raf because it becomes the khabar of the mubtada adun. So adun istakbaru fil ardi. Now what's happening here? The mubtada and the khabar, al-jumlatu, becomes the jawab of the shart, which is mahzuf. So in other words, the sentence reads, Mahmā yakun min shay'in. whatever thing happened, and they were arrogant in the land. So what's happening here is Mahmā is actually a conditional word. It can even be possibly ismu shart. Okay, so Mahmā, harfu shart, or whether we even say ismu shart, yakun min shay'in. So yakun is fi'lun mudari'un naqisun. So Mahmā is probably be befitting to say ismu shart. Yakun is fi'lun mudari'un naqisun. The ism of yakun would be the who are referring to Mahmā. Min shay'in is the khabar. So Mahmā yakun min shay'in, this is the shart. Whatever thing happens. Fa is the jawab of the shart. And adun istakbaru fil ard. Adun is mubtada'un, istakbaru fil ard. The fa'il mazi with the fa'il and the muta'alliq becomes the khabar of adun. The mubtada and khabar becomes the jawab of the shart, which is mahzuf. This is what's happening behind the scenes. But what we see on the apparent is the shart has been omitted, which is yakun min shay'in. Okay? And Mahmā became Annā. Mahmā became Annā. So after yakun min shay'in was omitted from the sentence, okay, the ha was omitted, and in place of the shart being omitted, Hamza was added at the beginning, and idgham was taking place. So Mahmā became Annā. And the jawab of the shart, in between the mubtada and the khabar of the jawab of the shart, the fa has come to suggest that actually this is fa is for the condition which has been omitted, which is yakun min shay'in. So in other words, adun istakbaru fil ard is actually mubtada khabar forming to become the jawab of the shart which is hidden. But in between the mubtada and the khabar, the fa has appeared, which normally would have appeared before the jawab of shart, i.e. adun istakbaru fil ard. So all this is happening when we say amma adun fastakbaru fil ard. In terms of the bigger picture, we'll say it becomes jumla. Probably would be best to say ismiyatun shartiyatun, because Mahmā is considered to be ismiya, and also in the jawab is also ismiya as well. So there's a mistake there. So probably would be best to say jumlatun ismiyatun shartiyatun. But not every word after amma is mubtada. So look at this one. Amma after the word amma is actually maf'ul bihi. Amma al-yatima fala taqhar. So you will have to actually to determine what the word after amma is going to become. You will have to see what comes after the fa. Okay, if after the fa there's a jumla that can form to become the khabar of al-yatim, a noun after the word amma, then it'll be mubtada khabar. But here la taqhar, okay, which means as for the orphan, do not oppress him. Here yatim cannot become the mubtada for la taqhar. It's actually becoming the maf'ul. So amma is ismu shart, غير جازم. So probably best to say amma ismu shart, probably because when it signifies mahma is actually a noun. Al-yatim is maf'ul bihi of the verb la taqhar, so it's considered to be the object. Fa is in response to amma, which was mahma before, and the condition has been omitted, which was yakun min shay'in. La taqhar, la is nahiyatun, is prohibitive. Taqhar is fi'lun mudari'un majzumun because of the la nahiya, and the fa'il is anta. And what's happening behind the scenes? Al-yatima la taqhar. In other words, la taqhar al-yatim. Don't oppress the orphan. So whatever the matter, whatever the situation is, whatever thing happens, fala taqhar al-yatim. Do not oppress the yatim. So this is what's happening behind the scenes. So mahma, okay, yakum min shay'in, the condition has been omitted, and in place of that, Hamza has been brought at the beginning, the ha has been omitted, it became amma, and then the fa has come in between the maf'ul bihi and the prohibitive verb. So it's now brought as amma al-yatima fala taqhar. So this is how you will do tarkeeb of sentences like this. So not every single sentence after amma will be mubtada. You will have to analyze what has come after the fa. And it'll become jumlatun fi'liyatun here because obviously لا تقهر is a verb, and شرطية because it's involved in a conditional sentence. Next we have is أما actually becomes متعلق. So here أما بنعمة ربك فحدث. So here بنعمة ربك, the favor of your Lord, okay, فحدث, proclaim it, announce it. So here there's actually a prepositional phrase. So أما here is حرف الشرط, or if you want to consider it to be اسم الشرط because of مهما. B is jar, نعمة is مضاف, رب is مضاف إليه and also مضاف towards the kaf. The kaf is مضاف إليه. This prepositional phrase becomes majroor, and this prepositional phrase بنعمة ربك becomes connected to the verb حدث. Fa is in response to the jawab of the shart, which is actually omitted. حدث is فعل أمر. It says فعل مضارع. It's actually فعل أمر. So let's correct that. It's فعل أمر. Okay, and the fa'il is أنت, meaning, so it's فعل أمر. That's not majroor because of la, so that's a mistake as well. So it's فعل أمر. The fa'il is أنت. So حدث is فعل أمر. The fa'il is أنت. Okay, and it's got a muta'alliq which is بنعمة ربك. So what's happening behind the scenes? It's مهما يكن من شيء فحدث بنعمة ربك. Whatever thing happens, whatever is the case, proclaim the bounty of your Lord, the favor of your Lord. So here, يكن من شيء has been omitted. The ha has been dropped. Hamza has been brought at the beginning, became amma. So mahma is actually a noun. Amma you can probably consider to be a harf, but if you go back to its original form, it's actually a noun. The fa has come sandwiched now in between the muta'alliq and the fi'l amr, and now it's brought as أما بنعمة ربك فحدث. So this is what's happening in the background, and in terms of the bigger picture, حدث is actually a fi'l amr, so it becomes جملة فعلية involved in a conditional sentence, so we'll say شرطية. So alhamdulillah, that's the conditional particles complete. So the lesson was a bit long today, so we've probably gone over by about 10-15 minutes, but in terms of the bigger picture, let's just get rid of the annotation there as well. So we have now covered 32 different topics of Tarkeeb. Inshallah, next week we want to cover Jawab al-Talab. So just as the way conditional particles had a response, like in tansurullah yansurkum, verbs of request, so fi'lu amr, fi'lu nahi, al-ard, al-tamanni, al-taraji, hope, wish, etc. These also have a response as well. So you have amr and you have jawab al-amr. You have al-nahyu and you have jawab al-nahyi. You have al-istifham, jawab al-istifham. So inshallah, next lesson we'll be covering the responses to those sentences. If anybody is interested in any of our courses, we do have the Arabic rhetoric course complete, full, covering the 3 core disciplines of Arabic rhetoric: Ilm al-Ma'ani, Ilm al-Badi, Ilm al-Bayan, 78 hours of content. You can find on the website, packed with the exercises, summaries, etc. We even have the crash course as well, which we covered in the winter period. So that's 8 hours of content. So if somebody wants to purchase the reduced, package and wants to know about Balagha in a nutshell, that is also available on the website. We also have Mastering the Arab course as well. So if anybody wants to know how the Arabic diacritics work, you can also find that on the website. We have other many free courses as well. And you can also subscribe to our channel, Sidra Institute, where you will find our content, inshallah, updated and be of benefit for yourself in your journey of learning Arabic. For now, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.